AMD has finally officially unveiled their Ryzen 4000 mobility lineup, codenamed Renoir. These processors have two distinct tiers, the H for high-performance laptops at 45 watts TDP and the U for the lower power, ultra-thin segment, all at 15 watts TDP. Compared to the previous gen offerings, all of these are outfitted with Zen 2 cores, which, along with a boost to IPC performance, introduces great efficiency gains, mostly due to the new 7nm architecture. At the top of the stack for the U segment is the Ryzen 7 4800U with 8 cores 16 threads, which AMD compared with Intel's 10nm plus Ice Lake offering i7-1065G7, which it beat in single-core performance and also impressively in integrated graphics performance. AMD put on display the power of the 4800H, also with 8 cores 16 threads, and compared that to Intel's 9700K desktop processor, claiming that it provided better performance in gaming workloads, which at 45 watts TDP is a very impressive feat. AMD is also introducing a new Smart Shift technology, along with Renoir, which allows for dynamically adjusted power allocation between processor and discrete graphics card, essentially turning an AMD CPU plus discrete graphics card solution into an APU-like experience, with a tighter integration between them, saving power and boosting performance when only one component is under heavy load. It remains to be seen how effective it'll be, but initial numbers seemed promising. Keep in mind that none of the new APUs will be outfitted with Navi-based graphics, since I've seen quite a bit of confusion regarding this point a bit all over the internet. Let's hear it from Lisa Su herself.
And when I spend a minute on the graphics cores, we've actually done a tremendous amount of optimization around these graphics cores. So they're based on our Vega architecture, but they actually have 59% more performance than the previous generation. And that's all the design optimization that's been done.
So there you have it. It'll be Vega graphics across the board, albeit optimized compared to the previous offerings. And confirming earlier leaks, AMD also announced the RX 5600 XT graphics card, which will launch on the 21st of January at a $279 USD recommended price. The card seems positioned to take the fight to Nvidia's GTX 1660 Ti, and that's exactly the card it was benchmarked against on stage with positive results. As mentioned in earlier videos, it's a cut-down RX 5700 with the same number of stream processors, but reduced clocks, a lot less memory bandwidth, and only 6 GB of it, compared with the 8 GB of its cousins up the food chain, and even some versions of the RX 5500 XT. This release was not very surprising, given that at least two board partners leaked details in advance, but something that passed under most people's radars was that AMD, while not announcing it on stage, added the product specs of the RX 5600 to their webpage. And that one will be a cut-down RX 5600 XT with 32 compute units instead of 36, and will be present only in OEMs according to AMD, at least for the time being. Speaking of graphics, and while we're on a roll, AMD also announced their new mobility offerings, the RX 5700M and the RX 5600M, which signal an intention to compete for the higher-end laptop market that had previously been out of reach. Besides a Q2 launch date, not much else was disclosed about the products, aside from a proclamation that 2020 is the year of the gamer, whatever that's supposed to mean, so we'll have to wait to see how they stack up to Nvidia's offerings. And lastly, the big one, a confirmation of the leaks about a whopping 64-core, 128 threads Threadripper, named 3990X and fittingly priced at $3990. It'll be available to market on February 7th of this year. Upon its announcement, Lisa Su joked about needing all three screens to show how it compares to the competition.
I actually need 3 screens to show you what you can do here. And
then she proceeded to show how it beat two Xeon Platinum 8280 working together in a V-Ray 3D rendering benchmark by a staggering 30 minutes. Keep in mind that the dual Xeon solution would be priced at $20,000 USD total, which is an impressive display of AMD's firepower in this super high-end market where once Intel reigned supreme. Nvidia didn't have a whole lot to show at CES this year, but perhaps the most eye-catching bit of news is the release of the ASUS ROG Swift with Nvidia G-Sync, which is a world-first release of a 360Hz display. While other manufacturers have been pushing for 4K and 8K displays, ASUS went a different way, abandoning the super high resolutions for a no-frills 24-inch 1080p monitor, tailor-made for esports competitions in which the norm has been 240Hz for a while. However, neither Nvidia nor ASUS provided details about launch date or price, which is a shame since even if you don't care about super high refresh rates, you might be wondering how a proliferation of 360Hz monitors might affect pricing for 60 and 144Hz displays. Furthermore, Nvidia also unveiled a new version of their game-ready graphic drivers, which brings along with it some new features, such as a max frame rate setting, essentially a frame limiter, support for an additional 8 G-Sync compatible displays, and an update to the image sharpening capability, which allows users to enable GPU scaling without image sharpening being on, and introduces support for custom resolutions. Perhaps the highlight for those of you who are VR enthusiasts is the VRSS setting, or variable rate supersampling, that uses Turing's variable rate shading to the center of a VR headset display where the eye is most often focused. This will only happen when there is a GPU headroom, maintaining a fixed FPS for a smooth VR experience and improving the image quality. And if you were wondering whether everything just works and what you truly crave is rays being traced non-stop, fear not. RTX was not forgotten at the presentation, with Wolfenstein Youngblood getting a free patch introducing ray-traced reflections and, to help with the performance hit, DLSS support. It's still a long cry from the long list of RTX-supported games touted when RTX cards launched. But it's one more entry into the mix, and we'll see how it benchmarks in real-life performance from independent reviewers. Intel's conference was definitely the most uninspired of the bunch, with a long introduction by CEO Bob Swan and a dissertation about AI technology, 5G networks, and the importance of moving data in business, the impact of computing in transportation, and how video, especially video streaming, will be a killer app in the coming years. All of this seemed geared more towards an investor crowd than the consumer, since it consisted of a lot of theoretical talk of which pathways to choose as a business and not so much upcoming concrete products being discussed. Eventually, Intel moved on to 3D athlete tracking, which finally put on display practical applications of a technology. Volumetric video allowed us to see points of view of a game from places where no cameras were placed through virtualization, allowing for greater flexibility in sports events coverage. The technology is only halfway ready, since the speed aspect of it has been taken care of, but the image quality still needs to be improved. It was surmised that Intel needed 6 times more computing power to achieve this, and it was considered a doable goal. Next on the schedule was Project Athena, a design partnership between Intel and several laptop makers with the aim of improving responsiveness, unplugged performance, and battery life of all the devices under the project's umbrella. Several such devices were shown off, now including Chromebooks, thanks to a partnership with Google. Still under the project's purview were a couple of so-called foldable PCs, one of which had a horseshoe bend design that, well, just didn't look like anything you'd want to buy, and quite honestly, horseshoe seemed like a code word for doesn't really bend properly. The screen also had an awful plasticky look and an unseemly level of reflections. For the assuredly tremendous price, I don't think the technology is there just yet. Next up, an Adobe representative showed off a couple of Intel-powered AI features.
How many of you are Photoshop users? Thousands of hands! Wow. We thank you. So I'm going to showcase today some very super cool AI powered by Adobe Sensei, driven by the power of the 10th generation Intel on this amazing thin and light device, which really solves a lot of the issues that Photoshop users and designers face every day. And the first is quite simply making selections, right? So here we have an image that I shot in Africa, and of course we want to select this. Now, depending upon all the various tools that you have, it can take some time, even with a stylus, because we have fur or hair. Anything that isn't just a sharp, hard edge is time-consuming, right? Yeah. But again, with Intel, with Adobe, powered by Sensei, we can now simply come up to our select menu here. I'm going to choose select subject, and in seconds, something that could have taken minutes, boom, is now done. And we have a perfect selection. Every strand of hair, every piece of fur, the bird, preserved. Your minimal excitement says it all.
I love
Thank you. Since I have to go in here, and I have to manually crop and reframe that video before I can export. And that's at a time loss to me. So, with Adobe Sensei now, powered by Intel, I can simply right-click on Auto Reframe. I can choose Auto Reframe Sequence, where now I have an option to choose a whole series of different aspect ratios. In this case, we're going to go to the standard vertical 9:16. I'm not even going to modify anything else. We're going to go with the defaults. And something that would have taken time, lots of time, done, just like that. And it's not just analyzing the motion. It's not just analyzing faces. It's looking at region of interest. It knows what all of your people, all of your viewers, all of your followers, all of your customers want to see. Can you feel it?
All right. All right.
I feel my hair growing.
And finally, after a long drudging presentation, onto the chips. Tiger Lake mobile processors are coming, and they'll feature the Xe graphics architecture, along with Thunderbolt 4 and Wi-Fi 6. The new 10nm plus processors will apparently have a double-digit performance improvement over last gen, but no benchmarks were provided. Very rushedly, Intel's new DG1 discrete GPU was also announced to be up and running, and a quick demo was shown, with no benchmarks or an FPS counter. There was no mention of the new Comet Lake 45-watt mobile CPUs in the presentation, but Intel had given a workshop hours before where they were announced. These are 14nm++ processors, which are bringing improvements in frequency, hitting above 5 GHz, but no information on how sustained those numbers will be, or if they use the new thermal velocity boost technology to achieve them. And with that said, Intel's meandering conference devolved into rushed announcements of products that aren't all too exciting for the enthusiast crowd, and vague promises of high-end 10nm+ laptop chips, maybe at the end of the year. It felt a bit too much like the Blue Giant was just spinning its wheels for the entire duration, and the pacing of the presentation really didn't do it any favors. And finally, when you speak of Sony, there's always one question on everyone's minds. Did they mention the PlayStation? Well, usually at CES, Sony chooses to display the other side of its business, with TVs and other consumer electronics taking center stage, but maybe due to all the leaks and speculation, they did decide to give us a little nod. And when I say little, I mean little. Essentially, it boiled down to a logo reveal and to confirm some basic features like Ultra HD Blu-ray and an SSD. But look at this logo reveal though. I mean, wow! It's the same thing with the 5, which, from a marketing standpoint, I kinda understand. You look at that and you instantly know what it is, what it's for, and what to expect from the product. That's the kind of brand recognition you don't want to mess with. But come on, give us an actual reveal then.
Apple roared into the TV game with a morning show, a superb drama, yeah, about the importance of dignity and doing the right thing, made by a company that runs sweatshops in China.